Shut up, Evan. Shut up, Evan. Shut up, Evan.
Do you have a side preference, though? I'm willing to swap. No. One never knows.
No, I think I did before I had bangs, but now it's like...
How's your day been so far?
Really good.
Do you feel like you excelled at the Criterion Collection?
The one movie I found was Inland Empire, which is not... It's a David Lynch movie that I did a day on because Laura Dern called me and said, David wants you to come over and be in this movie. Can you... And it was at a working meth house, like with people coming and buying meth. And you just started picking up dirt and rubbing it all over my face. and that was my David Lynch day. It was the weirdest day.
Wow. Well, I was saying earlier, it's like I feel like I'd have a hard time with Criterion because I just think my sensibilities are less... I feel like there'd be a lot of selections I'd want to make that wouldn't be in the room.
You know, several of my favorite movies weren't there, let's be honest.
Have you been forced to do the Letterboxd select 4 films yet?
No, I don't think so.
So that's become a real red carpet staple where Letterboxd approaches actors on carpets and says, so like, give us your 4 favorite films. And it's very interesting because some actors take it very seriously and are really trying to think, what are my 4 favorite films? Others are trying for like a viral moment and will be like Ratatouille or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. But I feel like people are obsessed with learning about actors' interests in cinema.
Huh. One of my favorite films is Waiting for Guffman. That would be one. One is very different from that is Roman Holiday because I knew both of those lovely people. Knew Greg Pekin had an extraordinary moment with Audrey Hepburn, which I did talk about at the Criterion thing. So what's another top 3? I would have to put, I'd have to pick out something wonderful with my friend Diane Keaton right now because I'm very full of emotion about her. So it would probably be Annie Hall, you know. I don't know. Those are 3 that I love. But then I love, I like, how do we choose? It's hard.
It's challenging. We haven't even formally begun the interview, and you've already name-dropped David Lynch and Audrey Hepburn and Diane Keaton, which has me wondering, do you have a memoir in you?
Someone has approached me about it, and I've had a couple of meetings with him, and I said I would have to call it, I don't know that it could be a memoir, but I could say a collection of short stories that happen to be true by Mary Steenburgen. That's what I would call it. Because I guess I'm very sensitive to not only in telling my story, I do tell other people's stories a little bit. And I'm very sensitive to that as in some cases an invasion of privacy. So I think I wouldn't want to tell the whole story of my life. But if I could tell it as individual stories that I felt comfortable telling, then I could do that. So someday maybe. But my friend makes fun of me and goes, when I say something about a famous person, he goes, oh, let me pick that name up off the floor. And I go, well, I made my first movie at 24. I have been around a lot of famous people. I'm 72. That's like nearly 50 years of being around those people.
Yeah.
So what else am I going to talk about?
Well, if and when you drop that memoir, I will certainly be picking it up. Mary, thank you so much for being here. It's such an honor.
Well, thank you. I enjoy you. I think you're wonderful, and I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you. When you find out that you're going to sit down for an hour-long interview, how does that feel for you?
I don't know if they told me it was an
You're like, I'm out of here.
No, I'll tell you why it's not that hard for me. I did a harder thing one time. I used to swim on a swim team, and once a year we had this thing called an hour swim, where you had to swim in the pool for an hour and you could not touch your toes to the bottom. And the first 10 minutes of that were like my brain was going nuts. And it was just going, you can't do this. You're never going to do this. You are going to put your feet down any minute. Just say you can't do it. Like it was this devil, talking to my brain. And then finally, after about 15 minutes, it did quieten down. And then finally, the last half hour, I just swam. And it was so this, in comparison, is very pleasant and easy.
Mm. But I do recognize that sometimes I feel like the first 10, 15 minutes of some interviews are getting us up the mountain, and then we get there, and then we can kind of, walk over the plateau of it all. But sometimes there's like the climb up to like calibrating each other's energies. But one of the joys for me of interviewing is sort of finding a person's energy and not necessarily matching it, but figuring out how to be in harmony with it.
Well, I have a funicular that I brought, so we're not even climbing. We're just sailing up to the top.
Amazing. What has your relationship been like with interview over the years? I mean, as you've mentioned, you've been doing this for a long time, and I feel like interviews have changed. Podcasts didn't exist. Back then, I think with late night, it was much more about bits, right? Coming on a tight 6-7 minutes, a pre-interview about you're going to share this story about your run-in with Audrey Hepburn, what have you. But now there's long form and I think much more introspection around your life. And have you felt that?
There was no moment where I talked other than like a print journalist for an hour before. Nothing on camera was an hour that I remember when I was young. I have found fame lovely in some ways and challenging in others. And one of the ways was just finding, again, a responsibility to the people in my life, for example, most especially my children, now my grandchildren too. And it's like they both get a kick out of what we do for a living, and they have their own lives, and they don't necessarily want to be listening to their mom talk about them, invading their privacy. So it's finding your way with it has been kind of an interesting challenge.
And at one point I read that you moved to Ojai sort of in an effort to, get away from that fame and to find some semblance of a quote unquote normal life.
Yeah.
Was that in service of motherhood for you and for your kids? And was there any part of you that had any trepidation about the impact it would have on your career? Or at that point it was like, listen, I gotta go here for my kids?
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Nobody's ever asked me that before, but I worried about all those things. I did move there because it was better for my kids. And at that time, also better for my marriage to my first husband, Malcolm McDowell. We both still live in the same little town of Ojai. We live Ted and I live partly in LA and partly in Ojai. And Malcolm and I, thankfully, are really close friends, which is lovely. And he has three not little boys. He has three young men that are his sons, that are my kids' little brothers, and I love them. But yes, we moved there because life in LA didn't make sense to me. Like I didn't know how to play the game. I didn't particularly want to play the game. I didn't want to be seen in the restaurants or go to the parties or any of that stuff. I was pretty shy. I kind of struggled with shyness in my life, especially socially. It's less shy for me to come and talk to you, which would scare a lot of people, but I'm more scared to walk in the door of a party. And also, I love nature. I love gardens. I love hiking. I love dogs. I love all that. I had raspberries in my front yard. I had chickens, and so we lived in Ojai, and I loved it. My kids went to school there, and I raised them there. And now my daughter and my stepdaughter have moved back there, and are sending their kids to the same school.
Wow.
So,
And interestingly, when I was doing my research, one fun fact about you that really stuck with me is that you and your sister own your childhood home.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was so beautiful because I just was wondering about my own childhood home. And when I go home to Pittsburgh, I'll pass by it sometimes and gaze in from the outside. but I'm not inside of it anymore,
Right.
right? I don't have, I'm not within the memories.
Right.
And I'm wondering what it's been like for both you and your sister to have that ownership and kind of keep some connection to the past in the present.
Well, first of all, I love Pittsburgh. Ted went to school there, and I made a movie there, and I really...
Oh, wait, Happiest Season.
Yes, I loved it. I had such a good time. We all lived in, I think it was the Armstrong Cork Factory plant is now like this really cool building, and I had a great apartment there. So that house is just a little small brick suburban 1950s house, and it's really not anything special except for my sister and I, and we have never quite been able to let go of it. And so my brother-in-law's son is living there, and he takes really good care of it. And I have gone in. I will say to you, if it helps at all, when you go in and you don't live there anymore, and it's not your furniture, and it's not resonant with the people and the smells and the music and everything that you grew up with, it's kind of okay to just be watching from the outside, because it's kind of like, oh yeah, it's not really mine anymore, but it is on paper, and it's just, even driving past it is very sweet.
It's funny, sometimes places hold this attachment and other times it gets completely lost. I lived in the East Village for 12 years in the same apartment, and I'll walk by it sometimes now consciously. Like, I'll be on my way somewhere and I'll be like, I'll go out of my way for a few blocks just for the chance to be on the street again and be outside the building. And I feel nothing. I feel no attachment to this building. And I lived there from 20 to 32. So very formative time in my life, but I feel nothing. And yet with my childhood home, just driving past it, the memories flood. But so it's interesting. It's like sometimes these places hold a lot of value to us, and other times they're just a place we lived for a period of time.
Childhood is, that magic moment in our lives where everything is happening, and so I think we all remember those places with something.
I'm wondering about, your work as an actor and as a humanitarian. I think there's a connective thread between the two around empathy. And I'm wondering about your relationship with empathy, where it first developed, and if it's something that you honed, if it was innate. And yeah, just empathy seems to be present in a lot of the work that you do.
Well, thank you. Nobody said that to me, but I like the thought of that, because it can be a detached world. It's those connective tissues are more and more important, I think. I think I got the lessons I got from my two parents, Nell and Mara Steenburgen, who were very hardworking people. My dad was a freight train conductor. And one of the early things, and I talked about this when Ted and I received the Bob Hope Humanitarian Award, that my dad was supposed to throw, and they used to call them at that time the hobos, but it's the people that would hitch a ride on a train and be hiding in there, trying to get from one place to another. And he was supposed to make them get off. And he was very much a man that played by the rules at work, but that's the rule he would break. And he would look the other way. And when I asked him why, he said, because I can't kick a man when he's down. And so that lesson of extending your heart, even at the cost of being a little different than the way you normally are, which is a rule follower in his case, I got that. And then I went to church a lot in my childhood, and my church, it's the denomination was Disciples of Christ, which sounds very intense, but it was actually unbelievably loving and gentle. And it was really about inclusion and about, I don't know, I grew up with an image of who Jesus was, and it was not a punishing, judgmental, exclusive human being. It was something very different. And so that was a very powerful influence for me too. And then as I got older, just the music of the 60s, the dreams of the youth of the 60s, the feelings about war and things like that, all that stuff, I suppose, is in the mix of who I am.
Do you think being empathic makes you a better actor?
I studied at the Neighborhood Playhouse with Sandy Meisner. So the whole point of Sandy's work was that it's not about you thinking about what you're doing. It's about you putting all of your attention onto the other person. And I just made you nod. You didn't plan that ahead of time. I just made you laugh. You didn't plan that ahead of time. And yet there are actors that plan these moments, and it's like, no, you don't know what's going to. I never know what's going to happen when I go to do a scene. All I do is memorize the lines. I know who I think she is and what she wants out of life and stuff, where she came from, but I don't plan anything other than learning my lines, and I try to learn them like a robot. And then I try to be empathic to the person I'm acting with, or if there's no person, then the letter I'm receiving or whatever the moment's about, and then whatever happens to me happens. And sometimes I'm good at that, and sometimes I go home and go, well, you blew it today. I mean, if it were that I could achieve that 100% of the time, I wouldn't be interested.
Totally.
Yeah.
I want to talk about some of your humanitarian work, and the list is long, but I think it's worth reading. You've worked to help protect and preserve the world's oceans, to increase arts funding in schools. You've advocated for the LGBTQ+ community, for pediatric AIDS, ending child hunger in America, and Pathway to Kinship, which works to provide access to housing, education, and employment to the formerly incarcerated. And you also co-founded Angels at Risk, a nonprofit which addresses the crisis of drug and alcohol abuse in teens and families. And so I'm wondering, in your work as a humanitarian, how do you decide where to put your focus and where you can be effective?
I appreciate being called humanitarian. I appreciate the award we received, but I think in our heart of hearts, we don't quite feel worthy of that. Because for every one of those things that you named, there is someone who does more work there than we do, way more. That's there every day. I don't know if you get to a point where you go, yep, I deserve that title. So I got to say that. And then there was a second part to this about how do we choose, or I think it's like people come into your life and they move you, and the nobility or the courage of what they're doing or fighting for, it moves you. And so you try to do what you can to help, whether it's financially or calling attention to it or making a speech about it. And many of the things are just born out of what feels like being a decent human being, not anything heroic or special, just like caring a little bit,
Do you think the world is lacking in decency?
I think there has been there's a lot of beauty online of one of the maybe it's a silly thing, but as an animal lover, I've said to Ted sometimes that I said, there's never been a time in history where animals have been observed and recorded and that information shared with others as there is right now. So we are learning, and yes, I know some of them are AI fakes, and I know there's not really a chicken on the back of a pig on a trampoline. My son told me that's not real. I was devastated. But anyway, there are beautiful things that we're learning about our four-legged friends and others, that are lovely, and so I like that. But I also see an acceptance of meanness on there that breaks my heart, that I fear for my grandchildren's generation of that, and it's not like we were perfect. We were not. And there were bullies in my world too, but I just feel like a celebration of making it seem cool or funny. I don't like it. It's like, how do you come back from that?
Well, I was going to ask you, do you think that it's something that we can reverse course on, or do you see it kind of like the toothpaste is out of the bottle?
I hope we can, and I do hear things about really the young generation revolting against it, and that would be good, because we're all we've got, and this planet is all we've got. So that caring about each other and about the natural world, it's terribly, terribly important. And I know my generation screwed it up, or didn't make it better. But some of us have really tried, and I really hope it's something that young people just do what they can about it and raise their voices about it, and also about the kindness factor too. Yeah.
I think conversations about kindness are important, because I think that, I know for someone that's often online, the sort of this speech we're talking about, the hate speech that has been proliferated so much, it's so omnipresent that it's easy to sort of just observationally allow that in,
right,
without forgetting that it's like, yes, we're forced in a sense to take that on, but we can kind of do our best to redirect that by putting forward kindness and putting forward new ideas that are against that, to sort of, I don't know if you want to call it like counterweight, but I think that that's really important.
I totally agree. And all of us get angry at things, but understanding ways to deal with that doesn't smear everybody with it, Yeah. Like, deal with it yourself quietly in your own home. Don't smear everyone with that. And it's, I don't know, I feel it more and more as a grandmother and as someone, as I'm getting older. It's not how I wish this world would be at this moment in my life, that's for sure.
So I want to talk about your move to New York City. You were born in Arkansas. You moved to New York City in 1972. And I read a lot of celebrity memoirs, and I'm always fascinated by that moment before someone makes it big. And it's like been a fascination of mine for so long, because it's something that even some of the great memoirists aren't really able to capture, whether it be the weeks or months leading up to it. And I mention this to you because you have a very specific make it big moment in 1977,
right,
when you meet Jack Nicholson.
Right.
But in learning that you moved here in 1972, I'm like, there's this 5-year period between when you arrive here and Jack Nicholson walking into the frame. And so I'm wondering about those 5 years and the 5 years before you made it big. I know you were waitressing at that time, but what was life like for you then?
It almost really makes me sound like Dark Ages, but here's the truth. I moved into a place called the East End Hotel for Women. It was on 79th and East River Drive, and you got a room and 2 meals a day for $42 a week. It was crazy. And it was a tiny cubicle of a room, and with my view was of a brick wall. There was no TV, no radio, or anything like that. It was just it was like a little tiny cell. And so shortly after being there, I met 2 other young women, and we all moved into a 1-bedroom apartment together. And so that was, at least there were windows and you could see outside.
What an upgrade.
Yeah. And I got a job at Doubleday Bookstore on 53rd and 5th. It's no longer there, but I passed the building this morning and saw the staircase that I used to carry books upstairs and stuff. And then, but I was, all I did was buy books with my 33 1/3 discount, because I never owned all these books. And so every time my paycheck came, there was nothing there because I was spending it all on books. So my friend said, you got to be a waitress. And so this wonderful woman at the Neighborhood Playhouse with me, Momo Yashima, she said, I'm working at a place called Noah's Ark, 65th and 1st, I think it was. And she said, that we need a waitress. So she said, I'm going to tell Bubbles, the bartender, that you've waited tables before. And I said, oh, yeah. And so we go there, and I remember Bubbles is like, who's she? And Mom was like, this is my friend Mary. She's a really good waitress, blah, blah, blah. Really sold me as experienced, which I'd never done it once in my life. And that restaurant had a kitchen downstairs. And so every time you turned in an order, you went down a flight of steep stairs and then back up. And then you had to keep going down and up to get the food, you know. And so by the end of that first night, I had blisters on blisters. I had stupid shoes on, of course. I immediately went out and bought orthopedic shoes. But I wore what I thought were cute shoes. Well, that was idiotic. And so at the end of the night, Bubbles goes, okay, you're hired. But she goes, don't ever lie to me again. And she knew I'd never been a waitress in my life. And so I worked there. That was my first waitressing job, and it was fantastic because I loved studying the people. You know, I made good money for, you know, New York in that day, and it was way better than I made in a bookstore. So I loved it, and then I was a waitress till I got that first movie.
It's interesting because you're talking about moving here, and you know, you move into this original space where you don't even have, you know, the one window is looking out at a brick wall. Then you move into a 1-bedroom with 2 others. You're waitressing. There's a version of telling this story in which it could be like, I moved here and I was like, what the fuck did I get myself into? And yet when you tell this story, you seem to tell it with a lot of pride. Like, this was a great time for you. So what was it that gave you the resilience to say, even though this is not the dream that I think some people imagine moving to New York City to be, I know I belong here?
I did belong here. I remember that very first day, I asked the desk, where should I go that's safe? I was very, very, people had really put the fear of God into me down in North Little Rock about how I was going to get mugged in New York. So I said, you know, it's broad daylight. And I said, you know, where could I safely go that I could walk from here? And they're like, well, walk up 79th Street and go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So I walked up there, and I recently went to find with Ted, the Renoir painting, and they'd moved it, but I found her of this little girl, this painting that I remember seeing on that very first day in the Met, and I fell in love with this painting. And it was by Renoir. I'd never seen a painting by Renoir in my life, in real life. No, I'd seen it in books. And then, you know, I walked back home, and there's this guy that kind of became a famous guy, I think, in the 70s, in like very kind of much drag, but sexy and drag and high platforms, and like danced in the street. And I just watched him for a little while, and I just felt like I belong here. I'm like, he's fine here. I'm just ordinary. I'm going to be fine here. I fit in here. Like, he and I both fit in here. As much as I loved where I came from, I also found it like people's dreams for me there were, I was supposed to marry a doctor. Not be a doctor, certainly not be an actor. So I suddenly was in this exotic, crazy place where it felt like, hey, if he's okay, I'm okay.
We'll be okay together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you find this job, you're working in the reception room at Paramount Pictures, and as the story goes, is that correct?
No, I wasn't working there. No, I was working at the Magic Pan, which is a creperie on 57th between 3rd and Lex. But I went into the Paramount casting room because I started doing comedy improv, and we started at the Bureau of Alcoholism doing shows for people drying out from booze. And we found if you could make them laugh, you could make anybody laugh. And then from there, we were spotted by Lynn Meadows, and she had us come to the Manhattan Theater Club and do shows in their cabaret room. And Chris Guess, who directed,
Waiting for Guffman, Best in Show.
His mom, who was casting director, saw me in that show and recommended me to Julia Taylor, who's casting director, to have this big meeting for just stuff like general meeting. And that was it was the Gulf and Western building, which is now, I think, part of the Trump.
So what do you think it was that Jack saw in you in that moment that not only sort of attracted him to you, but made it such that he was like, I want to cast you in my film?
Well, I did the meeting, and it was a really nice meeting with a really lovely, it wasn't Juliet Taylor, it was another lovely woman who was great. And at the end of the meeting, I said, are you casting anything particular? She said, I'm casting this movie called Going South with Jack Nicholson, but I can't get you in on it. We're full up, and it's like really beautiful models or well-known actors that have made films, and but I like you and I'm going to remember you. And so I got up to walk out and thanking her and everything. And then I just turned around and I said, listen, I know I'm not a model. I know I'm not a well-known actor. I'm just going to go sit out there for a second, give you a chance to rethink if you might want to give me a script to try and read. And she just looked at me like, what don't you understand about, I said no politely to you. So I went out, and it hit me what I'd done, that I had probably just burned the biggest bridge I'd ever crossed in the city of New York. And I sat down for a second. I thought, when the next person that went in there comes out, I'm going to poke my head in and say, I am so sorry. That was rude. I was pushy. I'm so sorry. So I'm sitting there composing my apology to her, and these 2 feet, and a voice goes, are you waiting to see me? And I think, that so sounds like Jack Nicholson, but I would have thought he's like in LA at a Laker game or something. She didn't say anything about him being in New York, much less somewhere in that office. And so I just kind of kept my head down, and I said, no, I'm not waiting to see you. And he goes, you're not? And I said, And he goes, why not? And I go, and I look up, and it's him. And I go, because I don't have a script. And he goes over, picks up a script, and he hands it to me. And he goes, you've got 10 minutes tomorrow. Told me the time. I just staggered out of there with this script in my hands. Stayed up all night. Went through my wardrobe trying to find something that looked like this character, And came the next day. Started reading. He just kept me reading and reading and reading. His pizza came. I stood up to leave. He goes, no, sit down, eat the pizza, keep reading. And then at the end of it, he goes, where have you been? I said, I've been here about 6 years, And he goes, well, I want to direct this, so you know what that means, don't you? And I said, yes, but I had no clue what that meant. And everybody had to tell me when I left there, they're like, oh, it probably means that he needs a big star because he's not a big director yet. So he can't use you, And so I go, okay. So for the next few days, everybody said, it's lovely, but there's no way, And then I call my answering machine from the Magic Pan and find out I'm going to Hollywood for a screen test.
Wow.
And then I borrowed $1,000 from some friends in Arkansas. I got on a plane, flew to LA. They put me up at the Chateau Marmont, and they were going to pay for one night's hotel bill, but I stayed 5 days and did agent rounds and stuff. And suddenly every agent wanted to meet me, and I kept thinking, wow, is that just how it works in Hollywood? Everyone knows about this? He was calling them and telling them to see me. I didn't know that until much later. Then my money ran out. It ran out so badly that in order to get back to the Magic Pan on my waitressing shift, I had to go in and get cash for that one night's hotel bill that they owed me. So I took a cab to Paramount Studios. I ran in there and said, "Thank you so much. That was great. Thank you. Good luck with your movie. It's going to be fantastic. Would you guys mind giving me that money you owe me for that one night's hotel bill in cash so I can get home?" And Jack's smoking a big cigar, and he just goes, "Sit down, kid. Don't worry about it. You're on the payroll." Boom, boom. One life here, one life the next second.
Do you ever sliding doors and sort of think about what would have happened if you weren't in that room at that moment and those 2 feet stepped up to you?
I mean, I will always say he's responsible for wherever I am sitting here with you. I feel like it's him. And not only because of that moment, because for the next 2 months after I moved into the Chateau Marmont, he had me go to Paramount every day and see 3 films. Then he would teach me about film. He was like my film professor, for months before we went down and shot this movie. So I don't, he always said, "You would have made it without me." And I always said, "I don't know how," because he was just the most generous of people to me. I asked him one time, like, "Why me?" And he's like, "I see something of me in you," and he was proud to be my mentor. And I feel like for the rest of my life, I owe him.
You talked about Diane Keaton at the start of the interview.
She was one of the ones that also auditioned. She screen tested. That's how it's really miraculous I got it. She and a bunch of other famous people tested for that part as well as me.
But it was yours.
It was mine.
So you mentioned Diane. We're talking about Jack now. And I have to mention, after Diane's passing, I decided to go back and rewatch all of her work. And when I got to Something's Gotta Give, I remembered that film because, who doesn't love Something's Gotta Give? But then upon rewatching it, I was just so struck by these 2 performances in this particular film and how I couldn't think of another film quite like it. And I'm wondering if you have any relationship to Something's Gotta Give or if you've revisited it at all in the last couple of years.
I haven't revisited it. She and I talked about him a lot because he was a big deal to both of us. She adored him, and so do I. I don't think I'm ready to watch anything she's in just yet. I'm still having a really hard time processing the loss of her, to be honest. We became very close, and it was just, it's just still hard for me. She's such an alive person that it's really hard to accept that she's not alive. And I've lost many people in my life, but this one, and I was boarding a plane to Japan when the phone call came, because I've always dreamt of going to Japan, and somehow Ted and I'd never done it, and we're just on the plane, and I'm get the call, so it just is still too fresh, and so I know I can't watch her just yet, but I will. But wow, what a remarkable actor, and what a remarkable human.
Yeah, I've obviously didn't know her personally. I've subsequently ordered all of her books, both the ones she's written.
She's a really good writer.
Yeah, but also her photography as well.
Yes.
Of everything that I've been left with about her is I went back and read so many interviews. I mean, there's this one particularly, Griffin Dunn, 1985 Vanity Fair, and in so many interviews, Diane talks about the joy of sight, of seeing. And I think in moments like this, when someone so important to the culture passes on, it's an opportunity to sort of reflect on what gifts that they brought to the world that we can kind of take from them. And I'm just really struck by this idea of sight. You talked earlier about, your love of the outdoors and of trees and nature. And I've been thinking a lot about that lately, just when I'm in moments, whether it be in the city or when I'm upstate, and just really looking around and taking stock of the gift of sight. And I find that to be one of the powerful ways in which sort of someone's memory can live on, and sort of how they change how you see the world through your effort to try and see it through theirs.
So funny when you're saying that. I'm having a visual thing that I was being silly because we were in Rome and we were in one of the many beautiful museums that we were in. And she didn't know I was right behind her. And I was filming her moving around, looking at some stuff there. And I was just being silly. I wanted her to turn around and start screaming at me that I was, stop stalking me or whatever she would do if she turned around and I was caught. But it turned into, she never did turn around. And I saw it the other day, and it was this video of someone who, just what you were talking about, the delight in the sight and the curiosity and the beauty. And she was such a visual person. Her home was, it could only be hers. It was a quirky, wonderfully strange and beautiful work of art, and we shared love of creating a home that is something that people enjoy coming into. And the first time she came into my home, she walked in the front door and she went, "I hate you. I hate you so much." I said, "Why? Why do you hate me?" She goes, "Because I love this." And she said, and she goes, "And I hate you that you're so secure you can use all this color and I have to live in black and white." And I said, "Well, every time I do a home, I say, this time it's going to be monochromatic and it's going to be creams and taupes and all this. And every friggin' time there's color everywhere." And she had to go through everything. I mean, to a point where it's like I had closed off things knowing she's going to look in my closet. And then she was horrified because Ted and I share a closet. She has like 42 closets or something. And so she was like, "How is that all your clothes?" And I'm like, it just is. I'm not obsessed with them, I'm not. And I mean, we were so different, and yet we had so many things in common, and we just fell in love with each other. And we did, only got to do 2 movies together, but they were a total delight. And I'm glad I'm talking about her, and I'm glad I haven't broken down in tears, although they're really right there. Close.
You mentioned these 2 movies you did together, Book Club and Book Club 2, beloved films. Book Club grossed over $100 million. The film stars both you and Diane Keaton, as well as Candice Bergen and Jane Fonda as well. Why did we not get more, not just Book Club? I was hopeful that Book Club would sort of indicate towards some of the powers that be in Hollywood that there is a vitality not only to movies starring women of a certain age, but also to audiences who want to see women like this on screen. I'm reminded of the success of The First Wives Club in 1996 when, again, another film that crossed $100 million, and yet, as it's been reported, the studios weren't willing to pay those 3 women what they demanded for a second film, despite the fact that the case studies suggest that it works. It's successful. Critics like it, but box office likes it. Like, people go and see it. Yeah. Why do you think that there aren't more book clubs?
Young people are beautiful. We do love looking at them. I love watching kids on screen and all that. I think the thing that was lovely about those films was that, well, one weird little lightning in a bottle thing was that none of us had worked together. And we're different. We're really different, all 4 of us. and we really fell in love. We really just fell in love with each other. It was like, Candice Bergen, are you kidding me? You cannot believe how funny she is in life. You can't believe the hilarious text she sends, or the heartbreaking ones when we're talking about, losing Diane. So, and Jane is freaking Jane Fonda. She's like, there's a reason why they're all legends, and we, none of us knew each other, and we fell in love with each other. We stood around singing horrible harmony together and pretending like it was good, and we all knew it was awful, and singing stupid songs together, and we just had the best time. And I think the films, you saw it on film. You saw that. And again, you and I were talking about kindness before. There's a lot of women hating on each other. And this was a movie where 4 women, had each other's backs. And I think people were like, yes, please, let me have some of that, because that's what I live with. That's me and my friends.
Were there any discussions about Book Club 3?
We're all pretty savvy about our business, and we all can kind of tell when it's going to happen, when it's not. And I think we just felt like maybe it's not going to happen. I don't know. I mean, it would be a very different movie now.
Yeah.
And maybe interesting. I mean, the show that Ted and I are doing, Man on the Inside, part of that story is dealing with loss. And I mean, weirdly, it's the one of 2 things, birth and death, that we all have in common, no matter what. But it's like, it's okay to show a little birth on screen, but we're not going to death, unless it's just some, I don't know, weird, violent stuff with superheroes. So, but sometimes it's okay to talk about the real stuff we all go through in life. It's okay to do that in our storytelling.
Speaking of Man on the Inside, so you are joining the series for the 2nd season.
Yeah.
Your beautiful husband, Ted Danson, is the star of the show.
Beautiful.
He is beautiful. This is your first time being a series regular on a streaming series, which I think is particularly interesting. You're fact-checking me in real time.
Oh, I'm just trying to think, but I think you're right.
I think I'm right.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting because you've done television, obviously, before, but streaming is completely different. I mean, you've seen so many changes in this industry. You're coming onto this show in its 2nd season, and yet you've worked with Ted quite extensively throughout much of your career. And so I can speculate what you like about Ted as a husband. That much I think is clear. What do you like about Ted as a co-star?
Oh my God. Everybody that works with him will say the same things. That from the minute he hits the makeup trailer on time in the morning, he makes everybody laugh. That everybody in there, he's the butt of all our jokes. Like every woman in that makeup trailer makes fun of him, teases him. He brings delight to people in life. He really does. He's safe. He's kind. He's like wickedly funny and fast. And he's just, people love him. People love him. Strangers love him. Babies love him. Dogs love him, although I do think our dog loves me best. But I think, I'm mama. So anyway, that our grandkids use him like a climbing gym. He's just a very special human. And he brings that onto the set. And then he's also this, drama is cool. No one's ever going to hurt me for drama again. I know this. But it's much easier to do than comedy, because comedy cannot be taught. You can't learn it in acting school. There is no algorithm for how to do comedy. It's either you're funny or you're not. You understand the elegance of it or you don't inside. Like, you can't even articulate what's funny and what's not. And some days you're not funny at all. And the next day, maybe it's like you're in a crazy mood from heaven and you're funny. I don't know. It's like, it's so ephemeral. And when I watched he and Shelley in Cheers, I just thought, those guys are ice skating with such precision in a way that is magical. And yes, their words. I mean, you don't do any of it without great writing. It doesn't matter how good you are if the writing's not good. So yes, the writing was astounding. And even people like Mike Shore, who has worked on The Office and Parks and Rec and The Good Place, and now Man on the Inside, he credits Cheers as just one of the great all-time shows. And but what they did was so special and beautiful, and as an actor, I was entranced by it. And I never would have seen it coming, watching the show. Like, someday, or you'll be sleeping with Sam Malone. But I didn't see that coming, but it happened.
Yeah. So often, the both of you are written about as couple goals, and I've watched so many interviews of yours, and so often you are asked to diagnose what it is about the two of you, or you're often asked to give advice to couples. That's something that people talk to you a lot about. Are you ever surprised or fascinated by other people's fascination with the fact that you found love? I think there's something that gives people a hope through your love story about the love that they might find.
It scares me because, first of all, well, maybe Ted's not as scared about it as me, but I'm always scared that we're nauseating people. That scares me. But then I say to myself, don't call love that, and don't be ashamed of that, or don't think it's uncool to love someone dearly for 32 years. It is remarkable. I didn't think, right before I met him, I told a very dear friend of mine who reminds me all the time, I am not good at relationships. I don't think I'm going to have one. I have 2 kids. They're amazing. That's enough. I'm done. That's what I said right before I met Ted Danson. And I wasn't great in my other relationships. I did make a lot of mistakes. I did screw up. I don't know an algorithm for relationships, but I know for me, one of the things, and Ted has the same answer to part of it, which is that it does no good when you go through a divorce or a breakup or whatever to waste your time talking about how terrible or what they did wrong or how they hurt you. You have to stare down what you did. And you have to own it. And then you have to, in my case, my ex-husband and I sat in a car and just had this heart-to-heart talk about everything each of us had ever done wrong to the other person, big and small. And I think it's one of the reasons we're still friends today. We're really close, actually. And I think that day might have done that for us, but that and the fact that we both adore our kids and wanted that for them. But I think you have to do the work. I don't even mean necessarily with a shrink or anything like that, but you have to sort of stare down your demons and own what you did wrong and try to be a little bit better, But I also think no matter what advice I could give someone, I kind of believe in angels, and I do believe that certain things are alchemic or mysterious or maybe a little bit heaven helped, And I'll tell you one thing. I had this Barbie game when I was a kid, and it was a Barbie board game. And Barbie had to choose one of 4 men to go on a date with. You could choose Poindexter the nerd, Bob he was like the dumb, athletic guy. Ken, the guy you were supposed to want, we all know Ken, and Tom, who had glasses and looked very smart and looked precisely like Ted Danson. And I always chose Tom. So I like to think that somehow in childhood I started manifesting this relationship. And I chose him when I was a little girl with my silly Barbie game. I might have to take pictures and send it to you.
Okay, please do.
It's pretty insane.
To wrap things up, I want to ask about your heroes. We talked about Jack Nicholson earlier and the role he's had on your life, and it feels like in talking to you, so much of your life has been about embracing destiny. And so I'm wondering, with all of the wisdom that you have, who today do you sort of look at as your heroes?
Living people?
I'll leave it up to you.
Well, I'm pretty old, so people keep dying on me, which is heartbreaking. But like Jane Goodall just passed, and she's one of my heroes. My mom was heroic in that she lost 3 children, and she still, like, you never saw my mom without this beautiful smile on her face. And she was such a loving, incredible mother, and she somehow managed to get through that grief and raise 2 daughters with so much love, and had to work to support our family during tough times. And so she was a hero. And my friend Jane Fonda is a hero to me too. I love her very much, and she's really trying to do everything she can to save this world, because she's so in love with her grandchildren that she wants to make sure that there's a world here safe from global warming and the things we're doing to our planet. And she never stops, and she's also an amazing friend, like a very intentional, very wonderful friend.
I get the sense that you're a good friend as well.
I think she's helped make me a better friend. Like, I remember her walking out my front gate and her whirling around and looking at me and saying, "Are we going to be friends?" And I said, "Yes." And she goes, "Don't say it like that. Are we going to be friends?" And I said, "Yes." And she goes, "Good, because you have to be intentional. I don't have a whole lot of years left, and I need you to be really intentional, and I'll be intentional." And I said, "You got it." And I am intentionally a good friend with Jane.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Mary, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I found this remarkably enriching.
You're so good at your job. Thank you very much for the care you took in interviewing me. I appreciate it. I got through talking about Diane without bawling my eyes out. I've cried every day since then.
I understand.
So it's like, who's more alive than Diane Keaton? That's what's hard about it. It's like, and it was too fast.
Yeah, she was so young.
Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate you talking about it, though. I think people want to keep her memory alive, and it's
She
helpful.
would have loved doing an interview with you.
God.
That would have, what a shame.
I know. I would have loved that, too.
Oh, you would have.